just following the social media pages of people who look different than you and learning how to listen and to sit back and not always comment on the posts that aren't spaces for you, but reading the captions so you learn from them.
Welcome to New World Normal, the podcast, where every week we'll talk to guest experts, thought leaders, and everyday people who are disrupting norms and working to create a more inclusive and holistic society. We will talk about the issues that affect us all: environmental, human rights, social issues, criminal justice, education, and the economy. We'll talk about wellness and about food, from how it's cultivated and distributed to how it's prepared and consumed. Basically, we talk about all the systems in our society that aren't necessarily working for the benefit of the many. We'll strategize and collaborate on how we, as a collective, can intentionally make better choices every day that will lead to positive changes in the world around us. If that sounds good to you, stick around and have a listen. And by all means, click like or follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast source. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the New World Normal podcast. Today, we're talking to James Barnes. James is a dad, a husband, a plant lover, and a creator of empathy. From a young age, he always wanted to help people, whether it was helping his peers who were struggling with depression or creating groups to hold each other accountable. He was consistently eager to lead and help. He now uses that passion to help ease the anxiety that stems from the LGBTQ plus experience for business owners, parents, and even LGBTQ plus individuals themselves. James is an expert in LGBTQ plus training and coaching. He loves to empower business owners with the confidence and knowledge to better serve transgender clients and employees, which will have a profound impact not only on their business, but society as a whole. I really enjoyed talking to James because I've been following his Instagram for a while, and it's just really a great space to learn and to grow. It's very informative and entertaining. So if nothing else, go follow James Barnes, the trans coach, on Instagram. You won't be sorry. And I hope you enjoy this conversation. Thanks for coming on. It's so weird. I see your face almost every day, so I feel like I know you. And you're like, who is this woman?
No, I totally get that. I have that with a lot of people as well. So I totally get it.
I'm glad you're open to that, because some people, I'm a person that feels like all my Instagram friends are my actual friends. So
absolutely,
chat stories and stuff. I'm like, I wonder if they're appreciating these chats, or if they're like, oh my gosh, would this woman please go away?
No, I hope most people understand. I mean, I have a lot of friends on there that I've technically never met, but they're what I would classify as some of my closer friends, which is funny.
That's great. It's definitely a bonus for the social medias to outweigh some of those crazy negatives that it's bringing.
Yes. Yeah. 100% agree.
So tell me about what you're up to with being a trans coach.
Yeah. So I have kind of two different avenues with being a trans coach. So I guess I would say three. So I have how I show up on social media, coaching the people who are on there, just teaching, using that platform to share knowledge, my experience, and kind of create more advocates and allies. I then have the coach aspect of being a real coach, where people who are transitioning, who oftentimes they're going to the therapist, they're talking to their doctor, but they're not actually interacting with somebody who is trans, besides on social media, like kind of what you said of talking to people and chatting. So they would like more one-on-one time.
I can imagine that would be huge.
It does help. Yeah. It's nice for them to be able to just have that one-on-one time versus texting. Because there are people where I do charge for the rates, and they'll say, oh, I can't afford that. I'm like, I'll still text. It's not just, well, you can't afford individual Zoom time, so I'm going to ignore you. So I still text people, and it's not anything like as one-on-one as the coaching sessions, but then I also provide coaching sessions. I just actually was working with somebody who's in the military, and so they were looking for advice on how to transition with that. So then the third facet is my corporate training, which is more of, I wouldn't say a business coach, because I'm not coaching businesses on how to do better in business, but I do coach them in how to Either they'll hire me for training, so LGBTQ training and creating advocates and allies in the workplace, or doing more consultant work of, you're not doing this very well. Let's try to figure out a solution on how to create a more safe, empowering environment. So those are kind of the three avenues of who and what the trans coach is.
That is awesome. I have a background in HR, so I'm really happy to hear that corporations are, taking a look at that and trying to do better.
They're starting to. Yeah, they're doing a lot. I think that any way that it starts is a good way, but it's always a bummer that it kind of is starting out from the avoidance of lawsuits. But as an HR person, that's kind of where anything kind of starts, is fear. And then
unfortunately it is. Yeah.
Yeah. But then it evolves and they see the people behind it and they get really excited and passionate. So it's a little spark that could fizzle out once the lawsuits are avoided, but instead they get really excited. And oftentimes what I've had happen is, halfway through the interaction, whether it's getting the coaching set up or the training set up, or the training itself is actually happening on Zoom, people in the chat or during the emails will say, oh my gosh, I just had a family come out to me. And it makes it really personable. So I've had mid emails with HR people and they'll say to me like, oh my gosh, last week, somebody just transitioned in my family or came out as trans. And this is like, so now I'm this much more excited about the training course. Or I think it was Comcast and Del Monte Foods were both in the chat while I'm doing the presentation. I can't see the chat because I've got my PowerPoint up. And I get out of the PowerPoint, I'm, doing the Q&A and I look over and everyone's like, James, you should look at the chat. And it'll just be, Comcast was hundreds of people saying, I'm actually wanting to come out at work right now. I'm gay. I'm trans. I never felt comfortable telling all of you this. Some people were like, I'm a parent of a trans kid. I didn't know all of you were allies. So like, it was just revolutionary for this little part of Comcast, so it's been really, really cool to create an environment where people don't know they actually are surrounded by allies. They just kind of assume, which is fair. But yeah, so it's been really, really exciting.
I think that is huge. Just the being able to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Just to open the door to people to even have questions about it or to realize that there are that many people that are allies.
Yeah.
Because everyone's afraid, I feel, that everyone's afraid to say something wrong. Or offend somebody. So it's rather like, I'm just not going to say anything at all.
For sure.
Doesn't get any conversation starting. So I know in our little community that I've been trying to foster, it's let's just talk about it. It's likely one of us is going to say something stupid, but as long as we hold that space for each other and try and help each other see different ways of talking about it and reaching out. That's why I'm excited to talk to you, someone who has way more experience on what's the right and wrong ways to go about these conversations to kind of help. Because a lot of it is, I think more people want to do better. But how do we do better?
Right.
And how do you see someone that it's interested in being a better ally? Like, what are things they can do in their lives, in their day-to-day conversations or interactions?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest problems or hurdles that people come to is they want to be an advocate or they want to be an ally. I think a lot of times we get imposter syndrome in even the smallest things. And so we think, well, I'm not an expert in this. I'm not a lesbian or I'm not bi or I'm not trans. So even though I'm an advocate or an ally, I don't know if I want to wear the rainbow pin or put my pronouns in my email, because what if people ask me and I don't know? Or what if I do say the wrong thing and I offend somebody? As a white person, I'm very aware that I will say things that have racist undertones that I don't know about. And that terrifies me then to say that I'm anti-racist. And what if I say something and then did all of that anti-racism work not work, And so you start to get ahead of yourself and then you have to remind yourself like, whoa, slow the horse down. You're putting the cart before it. You're just doing the best work you can as a person. I think that translates just the same to allies or advocates of, you're never going to fully understand what it's like to be queer, but you can understand the subtlest things, just like the word queer. I let a lot of people know, besides like Queer Eye, if you're saying that's a great show, other than that, you really don't want to use the word queer because there's a lot of undertones, but you're going to be hearing a lot of queer people say the word queer, and they're trying to take that empowerment of that word back. So trying to find that balance. And there's nothing wrong if you mess up and say it out of a kind way, but you don't want to be throwing that word around. Well, a lot of people are like, I didn't even know that. I always thought that word was horribly offensive. I didn't know anybody used that word, so there's all of these conversations about subtle things like that. So I think that the number one thing people can do when they want to be advocates or allies is, first and foremost, try to put yourself in people's shoes. So for myself, as somebody who is able-bodied, I don't understand what it's like to be disabled. So once I was cognitive of that, I was able to start following more and more people on social media who are disabled, not out of pity. It's just that realization of, I'm in a bubble, and I think I need to pop that bubble. I need to follow more people who are of color, and I need to follow people who don't look anything like me. The more I did that, the more I realized, oh, dang, I don't know. I don't know a lot. And I even have that as a trans individual. I avidly talk about the difference in my courses of what a person who is a trans woman of color versus my experience as a white person who transitioned to being the man that I've always been, but now I present as a straight man. I have a wife, we have 2 kids, very cliche, privileged family, upper middle class type neighborhood. And there is a difference between that and somebody who is a trans woman of color who is living in, let's say, the South or more conservative area. Their experience in life is going to not only be dramatically different than mine, but less privileged. I need to be aware of that. I need to use my voice to learn on that, but I also need to learn when to sit back and just be quiet and listen. So I think advocates and allies who want to do that, also just following the social media pages of people who look different than you and learning how to listen and to sit back and not always comment on the posts that aren't spaces for you, but reading the captions so you learn from them. Or one of the things that I teach in my course is there is a difference between advocate and ally. At least in my book, there is. So you have somebody who's an ally and they have the rainbow sticker, or they change the pronouns and they want to do, the work of creating a safe space. And that's valid. That's super important. They go to Pride. It's awesome. But an advocate is the person who knows where the rights are, or the rights are being lost. They know where the bills are with the Senate or the House, or with Texas passing certain laws. They understand what's at stake when it comes to the rights and the battle that is happening right now. They're aware of it. I do think that there's a difference because, and I use this example, I had a family member who would say that they're an ally and they love me and they care about me. But when the presidential campaigns were happening, they were going to be possibly voting for somebody more conservative. And I was shocked by that. And they are a straight white male. I brought up, like, how can you with me? And like, I don't get that. And they were like, well, what are you talking about? And I brought up just a few of the bills that had been placed under that leadership. And they were shocked. They had no idea, because while they were an ally and they care about me and they love me and they want to vote for everything having to do with me, because of the blinders that they have up, they weren't doing the advocacy work to actually see what was at stake. So they've always created a safe space for me. They've always respect the moment I transitioned. They respect my pronouns. They were fantastic, but they weren't doing the advocacy work of actually understanding what was at stake. The moment I brought it to their attention, they pivoted. They understood.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, they understood the assignment. They got it. But I had to do that for them, versus other family members who are advocates. They're staying on top of the laws. They're following social media pages that show them what's at stake without me having to do the heavy lifting. So that's what I would say of, there's different stages of growth and you have to find out where you're at, but you can continuously learn more and help yourself so that LGBTQ people don't necessarily have to do that extra work of creating more advocates.
That's an excellent differentiation
yeah.
of the ally
yeah.
and advocate. I appreciate that. And I have heard from people in the LGBTQ community, well, it's not my responsibility to educate you. So it's honoring that as well. But I love the people that are open and are willing to educate the following on the social media, because a lot of us do live in spaces where that we just don't encounter. I live in a space that's predominantly white and Hispanic. So that I don't really encounter a lot of different cultures in my community. Yeah. But love to travel and
so that's one thing that was really important with when my kids were younger, like to travel and go and
Yes,
see different
absolutely.
places and just trying to, there's a great big world out there. And now
Absolutely.
that social media does make it so that we can all interact a little more and humanize, like I feel like that's a big part of what you're doing is making the story more human. Because like you said, you present as a straight white
Mhm.
male, very nuclear family with the kids and the
Yes.
wife. I can see going especially into a corporate setting, you're like, oh yeah, this guy, he's great. And then
Yeah.
to hear your story, it'd be like, whoa, that's
Yeah.
huge. This is someone I could meet at Starbucks or some other cliche place and just
Oh yeah, for sure.
not think twice of,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
your stories and what you've had to go through to get to where you are and how you still have to fight to,
Yeah. It's what I like to call the 1-2 punch. I present one way, people get really comfortable. And because I look like their neighbor, I look like, the person on TV, not a movie star, but like I still look like a white dude that's comfortable. And then I like to just come in with that second punch of, but wait,
BT dubs.
yeah, exactly. And let's talk about some uncomfortable things. And I do use that privilege in my strategy. I'm very strategic about that because I realized quickly that there is this push and pull or this dichotomy of being a trans white man is you're still part of a marginalized group, but you have these privileges that the other marginalized groups don't have. And you can feel there's a lot of white trans men who feel really guilty about that almost don't want to transition because of that, because you leave behind presenting as a woman to society and often as a lesbian. And so then you transition to being a straight white guy. There is a lot of therapy that needs to happen, a lot of psychological stuff, and a lot of advocacy work that needs to happen to work through that guilt. And when I went through that, I kind of did go through a phase of should I just pass and be stealth and not feel like I'm taking from the other groups? Then I thought that's such the epitome of privilege that I can just be stealth. And I definitely have empathy for the guys that do stay stealth. They have every right to. And a lot of times it's safety reasons. But when I realized that, I thought, because I love people and I know people, and I thought, how can I manipulate this? How can I work with this and use it to not my advantage, but the cause's advantage? And I realized it's making people comfortable and then teaching them. And I thought back to my life and when did I learn the most? And was it when somebody was yelling at me or was it when I felt safe? And I thought I can really create a safe environment online and actually do a lot of subliminal teaching and creating advocates and allies who don't even realize they're advocates or allies. They just care about James and James cares about this. And all of a sudden it created this community that kind of has slowly started to blow up. And I'm like, well, this is awesome because there is a space for the people who are angry. There is a space for, and those people, those advocates and activists are crucial to the movement. But I do think that having people who are a little bit softer and creating that slower growth is just as crucial. And so I think together, we all have our own little pages and some are really angry activists and they're making huge changes. And then there's me over here who's this privileged guy who's making people feel comfortable. And then all of a sudden they're caring about people who are intersex. And they're like, I never thought I'd be caring about this, but I saw it on James's story and now I care about this. And I didn't know they were as common as redhead, individuals. And there's things that I like to do that, I know a lot of other pages, they're very focused on one set thing and they're very loud with their passion. And I think that that's just as important, but I have a lot of fun with my 1-2 punch strategy.
I appreciate it. And I was even thinking there's benefit for cis men because you're talking about masculinity. I know the other day you said something about, are you a man? Are you doing it? Well, then it's manly,
Yeah. Oh, so you're a man. Okay, cool. Then that's masculine. That's manly. Then there you go. You don't need to worry about anything else. I got a lot of messages from that. People saying, I never thought of that. That helped me so much. And I was kind of just being facetious with it. I didn't actually think people really would take that to heart and be like, oh, you're right. Like I am a man. So it really goes to show even the subtlest little things people listen to.
Yeah. I appreciated that as the mother,
yeah.
Don't have to be macho.
Yes.
Manly.
Yes. Yeah. I definitely struggled with that when I transitioned. I went through what I call my Mad Men phase. I had started watching Mad Men at the earlier parts of my transition. And I really, once I could start drinking, I didn't drink until I was 21. I'm definitely a rule follower. Drinks to me were always like this. It was truly the ritual. I really learned to enjoy the ritual of it. So I really liked old fashions and dirty martinis and suits and stuff. So I watched Mad Men and I was like, oh my gosh, that's like me, except I'm not John Hamm. And it's an exceptionally toxic show. Did you ever watch it?
No.
Don't watch it.
Bits
It's
of it.
very toxic. I mean, it's done well. It's great storytelling, but it's just everything that if the feminist in me you just hate it. I watched it in a really vulnerable, I would say vulnerable state in my transition. I was just trying to figure out my masculinity. And so I leaned into it and realized how much insecurity I had and really just crashed from it. I had this horrible moment in my life and I was kind of crawling out from this like figurative hole, and I started meditating and I realized how much I love meditation and I love people and I love a lot of what I believe you said your podcast and everything. Is it new world normal? Is that
New world
normal? And it's kind of that same vibe of just a lot of coexisting with kindness, wanting to do better. And all of a sudden I realized like, I don't want to drink. So I gave up drinking last year, and I don't want to, do negative things or be this like masculine macho kind of guy. And I want to be vegan and I like plants. And it's kind of another 1-2 punch because I do dress kind of broy. It's the one thing that's kind of funny because I'm from California. I kind of just have like that skaterish vibe. And so whenever people talk to me and I'm looking, I got my nice little chain, I got my trucker hat, my t-shirt. And then I start talking about how I want to raise my 2 daughters to be feminists. They'll be like, where do you want to eat? Well, I can't eat there. I'm a vegan. And I just love the look on their face. Like, who is this guy? This is the weirdest non-masculine bro I've ever seen. So
keep them guessing. I like it.
Exactly. Yeah. So masculinity there is no right.
How old were you when you transitioned?
26.
That's pretty young. How long did the transition take? I mean,
yeah, that's a great question. So there's 2 ways people answer it. Either people say, well, it's never ending. You're always transitioning, because technically you have to take hormones indefinitely. Sometimes some doctors say you can stop around 60 when your body really stops being predominant with hormones. And so like whatever changes happen, they just kind of ride out for the rest of your life. Then other people are like, the transition kind of is just kind of ending when you pass. And then other people, when they transition, they don't ever do hormone therapy. So every transition is kind of different. For me, I would just say I'm transitioned for 7 years. So I'm where I'm at right now is still my transition. It's very interesting being I think they say it's a medical transition is when you do hormones and surgery and stuff like that. My transition, when I started, I hit the ground running. So I came out to my family in 2014, the end of 2014. I was very passive aggressive about it. I joke about it. I basically texted them and was like, hey, would you love me if I was trans? Really manipulative because they're like, love you no matter what, ? Like, you're putting me kind of a hard spot. And so I was like, cool, I'm trans. And all through text, not mature in a healthy talking kind of way. But then literally like that January 1st, I came out on social media, January 2015, I believe. And then I started hormones January 25th. So like within that same month, and totally hit the ground running. And the voice changes and the beard all come within the first year. Not the beard. It's normally like 5 hairs on your chin. Sometimes guys get more, sometimes they get less. And then the rest of it literally happens very slowly over about a span of 5 or 6 years. So my beard is still filling in. And it was very adamant back then. People would say like, oh, in 5 years, wherever your beard's at, that's where it's at. I've learned it's still filling in now. And my face still feels like it's changing every once in a while. Going vegan actually changed my face structure again.
I would imagine because that would affect your hormones as well, right?
Yeah. It affects your hormones, your fat versus starches versus protein you're eating. Your entire diet changes. Whether you're vegan or not, I could say any diet changes your body structure because you're taking in different product. And so that changed. I had a really round, kind of square face, more bulky. And then I went vegan and I leaned up tremendously. So my face got long and more narrow. But yeah, it's been really, really interesting. I think if people ask, like, oh, what's your favorite part? And I would probably say my voice. I really love the voice I got with hormones.
You have a great voice for sure.
Thank you.
For sure, great
Thank
voice.
you.
And I'm here thinking, wonder if it'd be harder to transition to vegan or
transition in general. I lucked out. I went really slow. And I also was around growing up. My oldest sister, she's the second oldest, has been vegetarian since she was like 10. She's hated the texture of meat. So I was raised around vegetarian diets most of my life. And then I went really, really like slowly went pescatarian, which is just fish, and then slowly cut out dairy, and then went basically from there vegan. So I was really, it took about a year. I went really slow because I know myself, I'm ADD. And so I'll go really hard on one thing, do it well for about a week, and then get bored with it. And I go right back. So I went really slow with that. Drinking, I cut cold turkey because I wasn't going sober. I got headaches from drinking and realized, why am I drinking my calories? If it gives me a headache, have some really good, tacos, especially with going vegan. I've had really fun with the diet. So I'm like, why am I drinking my calories if I could have more tacos? So,
tacos are always better.
Yeah.
Oh, memorable encounters of corporate, the people coming out in chat, which is huge.
Yeah, those were exciting moments. And I think also what's been really fun is some of the people I've gotten to talk to, like Del Monte Foods was literally somebody found me on TikTok, followed me, went to follow me on Instagram, liked my stuff, sent my information to the diversity team. Diversity team set up an appointment, and okay, it'll be like 20 or 25 people, one of my smaller groups. And then we're on the call and they were, by the way, the CEO and CFO will probably be on it. And I was like, okay. And it was totally this dude in his kitchen that looked like a very fancy kitchen.
Very nice.
I was, oh my gosh, I think that's totally the CEO of Del Monte Foods. And it was. And so those have been some kind of wild moments where if somebody a year ago said I was going to be working, training, saying words like transitioning with non-binary or intersex or type of things, because that's what I talk about in my stuff. If somebody was saying I'd be doing those things with the CEO of Del Monte Foods, I would have laughed. That's ridiculous. No, all through TikTok, and it worked out.
Right. So, that's what I was going to say. TikTok, and you're saying, Comcast and Del Monte, like those are big corporations.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a very interesting 6 months. I've always wanted to I love speaking. I love people, not that you can tell at all. And I always wanted to be a motivational speaker. And growing up, I always thought I'm going to be Tony Robbins. And then I realized how much I don't like the, what's the word I'm looking for? Fakeness, not that they're fake, but you have to always be on because people want to be buying into something, rightfully so. They're paying a lot of money for these motivational things. They're paying a lot of money for all of these encouragement and experiences. And I realized I don't want to do that. I want to be able to be real. I want to be able to say, like, I'm having a really bad mental health day, or I'm struggling with this, or I'm just being real. And so social media kind of evolved from that. And then the transition stuff happened, and then COVID happened. And I had been teaching these courses to realtors. I was a realtor beforehand.
Okay.
And I got into real estate because when I bought our home, we were selling my wife's home and buying this home. And I had anxiety the entire time that I was going to be outed. Forgot to tell my realtor, title agent, and lender that I was trans. And a lot of times that happens for trans people. You kind of just either subliminally forget or out of fear forget. But either way, you forget because you forget that, there's an alias that they might pull up when they pull up my social security, number. They might need to know these things. And so you forget. And then you realize, normally for me, it was at like 2:00 in the morning. I woke up like, oh my gosh, I forgot to tell them. Now I thought, what if they find out and they want to fire me, or they don't want to give us a loan, or the seller of the home, who did have a lot of Christian stuff in their home, which I was born and raised Christian. And so there's a lot of triggering there. And so I'm like assuming how I was treated. So I'm like assuming all of these things about probably very nice people, but I'm assuming all of these horrific things. And I didn't have anyone to talk to. I didn't have anyone who said, hey, calm down. Just look at what Washington State's discrimination laws were. And I didn't think of that 6 years ago. So we buy the house, everything worked well. Nobody fired me. Nobody, avoided a loan with me.
Did you disclose or did you just keep it quiet?
I never did. It never came up and I felt horrified about it. While I appear very confident on social media, I definitely struggle with being a pessimist. And my wife is always, stop assuming the worst. And so I just was like, if I tell them, it'll go horrible. So I never did, because that's the healthy way to go. So my wife went back to work. She's a breadwinner. And I decided to become a realtor on the side, not realizing that it's a full-time job. But anyway, so I become a realtor, and I decided to become a realtor because of that traumatic type of fear I created in myself. I realized there's nobody in the area that I live that is an open trans person. And so why not fill that void? And so I became a realtor, and I had a goal of within the first year teaching an LGBTQ class to realtors to try to empower more people. It was going to be a really subtle class. I was on the diversity committee, and so I put it together and it went really well. And that kind of just lit that fire back in me that I had kind of put out when I was younger about being a motivational speaker. It kind of lit that back up. And the course did well. It had one of the highest attendance rates because, and this was 3 years ago, LGBTQ, the topic's a sticky conversation. And it goes right back full circle, Debbie, to what you said earlier of people want to be allies, but they don't want to say the wrong thing. And that is what I've learned tremendously with these corporate, trainings, whether it's high up people or I'm working with, I'll say, entry-level individuals. All across the board, there are people that are just wanting to help their coworkers, their peers, or just their family members at home, and they don't want to say the wrong thing. And so they don't say anything at all. And so realtors were the same way. They want to help their clients. They want obviously more clients. And so why not be a client who can help LGBTQ people, but they don't want a lawsuit on their hands. They don't want to say the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. They don't want to offend. And so taught the class again, and then COVID happened. And so other realtors who had heard about it reached out and they were, well, since we can't travel and Zoom's big, would you be able to teach it? Would you be able to teach it? Would you be able to teach it? And it got to the point where I was like, I can keep teaching it, but this is kind of a lot of volunteer time. So I decided to do a rate, and somebody reached out and was like, would you be possible, to do Comcast? And I was like, well, yeah, I can do Comcast. Here's a rate. And I think just having that mentality of being a professional, I'm now charging. I'm not doing this for volunteer, but I'm charging. And I do wish more people of marginalized groups charged for what they do, because that switch I did in my head of actually there's a rate. And I vividly remember I had a conversation with my wife of these are taking up too much time. I can't keep teaching these courses for free. And she said, well, why don't you charge? And I said, well, I'm not a professional. And she goes, well, you're a trans man talking about trans stuff. You're a professional. And I was like, oh my gosh, I should have been charging for these. And I had a friend who I did volunteer for her. I'd volunteer for her any day. She works with youth in a hospital, and she's been my friend since I was born, said, you should be charging hundreds for these courses. And I was like, what? And she was like, you're a public speaker now. And her father-in-law's a public speaker. And I was just like, what? This is wild. And it totally changed my mindset.
Weird roundabout way too. It almost legitimizes the information in a weird capitalist way,
it totally does. But it's true, it does. And I think that's what was the shift. That for me was a pivotal moment. And that was less than 4 months ago. But as you've seen on social media, how quick it's rolled, because I do believe that once I shifted from a capitalist type of standpoint, but I do think that marginalized groups view capitalism in a way that abuses us. Mm-hmm. But when all of a sudden you're on the other side of it as a small business owner, as a trainer, as any type of way, when you're on the side of capitalism where you're taking that power back, that type of shift all of a sudden is such an empowering type of thing. And you struggle with imposter syndrome because it's like, well, this space wasn't made for me. And which is ironic as a straight white dude this space was literally made for me, but as a trans person, it wasn't. And so there was all of these imposter syndrome type of moments. And then being able to say, now I get to take that space. I get to sit at the table and I get to define my rate. I get to define my terms. They don't want lawsuits. They want to talk to me. They want to create a better environment. I'm actually valuable. That was so hard for me to overcome, which is interesting because I do have social media. It's not like I have a huge following, but I have people who are very kind and loyal and support me that I've never met. I mean, we've never technically met, but you've been very kind and encouraging. And it made me realize, like, in my head, I feel safe taking up space on social media because I've created this safe little community. But stepping out and going to businesses, it was so scary. And then I realized those type of people are the same people who are on social media. They just have HR in front of their name or CEO, but they're still the people who are on social media. We're all the same. And when you take away that facade and you just realize that people are just wanting to learn and you have a skill set to teach them, and that skill set is worth a valuable amount, whatever the amount, each company you negotiate differently, but it's worth something. It makes you realize the power of telling your story, that there is worth in the trials you've gone through, the struggles you've gone through. They weren't for nothing. And you get to help people with that. You get to help people become better advocates and allies. And that's what they're paying for. That's what they're hiring you for. It's not just to say, with a whiteboard, this is what L means, this is lesbian, this is what B means, this is bi. You're actually, at least for me, what I'm coming to the table with is, this is the struggles I had. This is where the companies went bad or did poorly when I was working with 9 to 5. And this is how you can change it. And this is how you can be empathetic to trans women who are of color. And all of a sudden I'm creating this dialogue that they wouldn't have gotten, and so it's been really, really empowering. I definitely can feel my mental shift as a person in the last 4 months and how I view myself and how I view capitalism. So it's been very, very interesting.
Yeah. And I would say the big part of telling your story is making it relatable and humanizing it, because even if someone's not trans and transitioning, there's going to be something in your story that connects to them and builds that bridge, because I believe, like you were saying, we're all so much more alike and we want so much of the same things.
Yeah.
So it's important to build those bridges. And as far as capitalism, because I have a interesting relationship with that word and the principles, it's icky. It feels weird, but to know that their employees are seeing them spend money on something like that, because that's how they know that their employers value it. Because if they're spending money on it, then it's important. Oh, it's important for them to bring someone like James in to talk to us. This feels good. This feels different to me. Yeah. I mean, and it's encouraging. And that's part of what the New World Normal is. Like, let's find the hope. Let's find the lessons. Let's find where we want to work together and make it better and more inclusive. And so, yeah.
It is interesting because I think capitalism is such a key word. And, even as marginalized groups, our relationship with money and if we deserve money or don't, like there's all of these sticky layers that go to it. But I was born and raised in very low income. And so, unpacking all of that as I grew up and raising my daughters and wanting to raise, if they want to be stay-at-home moms, great. If they want to be CEOs, fantastic. I want to raise them to be able to do whatever they want. But you really have so much to unpack, especially with that word alone, but really what it means, So, yeah.
And how to navigate it in a responsible and holistic way.
Exactly.
I think it's possible.
Exactly. Oh, absolutely. I think it's just finding and giving back, like every time, getting a paycheck, not just divvying up between the business and yourself, but finding a way to give back and continue that cycle and continue the circle of like, how do I keep that positivity going? How do I keep the education going and remembering my why, because I do want as many people who are in marginalized groups to thrive off of capitalism, but I do want it to be where we give back to each other and we have each other's back and we're able to donate or even, for my wife and I, it's not always donating. Sometimes it's just buying a friend who had a new baby, buying those few extra casserole dishes from Costco for them versus, just the one. It's just little things that you can do where you get back to people where 3 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to afford that, and it's not like we're thriving right now, but just that little extra that you can do when you are doing well, I think is what helps keep that positivity going.
Yeah, you can definitely show up differently for your friends and family when you have a little cash reserve.
Yeah,
You're not wondering, how you're going to pay rent next month.
Yeah, how are we going to pay? Is the mortgage going to get paid next month? I don't know, yeah.
So we're coming towards the end of our time. One of my zinger question for you, if you could normalize one thing in the world right now, if you had a magic wand, what would you?
If I could normalize one thing, if I had one, I know without a shadow of doubt, the answer would be femininity in men. I think that if we could normalize getting rid of toxic masculinity and allowing men to be feminine, to be emotional and intimate with their relationships, more men would want to empower education in girls across the world. They would see the empowerment of that. If we could have education for girls across the world, so much would change, to whether it was the global economy and hunger and disease and climate change. Like, I truly believe if we could get men to be more in touch with their emotions and feel safe, the world would dramatically change. So that's what I would change. And that's what my goal has been, is to show men that you can be all of it, that you can be humble and strong and kind and masculine and all of those things all wrapped up in one really cool dude.
I think that's a beautiful mission. And it's true. It's going to affect all their relationships, which is just going to impact a bigger and wider group of people.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. What would be yours?
Oh, mine. Oh, geez. Empathy. Being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and see the world. I think if you could take a minute in most instances, even when you run into someone at Starbucks and they're being a raving lunatic, in your split second judgment, oh, wait a minute, I don't know what's gone on with their morning.
I definitely think that you forget that somebody else is living an entire life outside of you, an entire life. Like, their mom could have died that morning. You don't know, and I think that's such a frustrating thing, but it's like, if you can just step back and just think about being empathetic for a moment and letting your ego go for a second and just seeing them. Yeah, I definitely think the world would be a kinder place for sure.
Definitely. Well, I appreciate you
absolutely
coming on and talking. It's been great. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our show. If you enjoyed what you heard, feel free to subscribe and leave us a review. If you didn't enjoy what you heard, reach out to us. Let us know how we can make it better. This show is really about all of us, not just me and my guests, but how can we all make this world a little better. If you'd like to connect with us in other ways, be sure to check out our Instagram account. We also have a free Facebook community that participates in monthly get-togethers, and we work through challenges and have meaningful conversations about important topics, all in a space that is safe, supportive, and encouraging. So join us. If you'd like to show us more support, you can check out our intentional apparel shop online, New World Intentions. You'll find t-shirts, hats, totes, all with positive messaging to help you move mindfully through your day and help create that new world normal. The takeaways from today's conversation: you don't have to be an expert to be an ally. If you want to be a better ally, put yourself in the other person's shoes. And this can go for being an ally to any marginalized group, whether it's LGBTQ+, refugees, immigrants, people of color, etc. Follow accounts on social media of people who are different than you, but don't feel like you always need to comment. Observing and learning is more important in these times. If you want to make the jump from ally to advocate, get educated, get involved. There is a link in the show notes that will take you to a list of current legislation affecting the LGBTQ plus community. So that would be a great resource. Learning happens in safe spaces. If you want to teach somebody something, first make them feel safe and comfortable. Masculinity doesn't have to be macho. Are you a man? Are you doing it? Then it's manly. You don't have to be Tony Robbins to have a positive impact. You just need to be authentic. I really enjoyed talking to James today. I admire the work that he is doing, and I think he's going to have a significant impact on his community and our society as a whole. I wanted to comment on one thing that he said about wanting to make it easier for men to be more feminine, to express their feminine side. And it got me thinking about the phrase that's been thrown around a lot since 2016 about the future being female. And it just took it to another level for me. Initially, it was meaning, yes, there were going to be more women leaders, which I do believe is important. But I think it opens up the space for the feminine energy to lead the way, an energy that is more nurturing and collaborative and supportive, as opposed to the current male-dominated, power-driven competition, scarcity. I don't think those ways are serving us, and I really feel like James is onto something, and more men, especially men in leadership, embracing their femininity and the softer side, and a feminine energy leading the way. I hope that makes sense. I really hoped you enjoyed our topic today, and hope you come back next week when we'll be talking to Larnie Mulvey of the Strength Initiative. She's a lot of fun, so don't miss it.